Hello learners, welcome to this online session on Unit 9 Fieldwork and Ethnography. This is the unit which belongs to the program MA in Gandhi and Peace Studies and the course Introduction to Research Methods. Myself Dr. K. Anil Kumar, Assistant Professor, Discipline of Anthropology, School of Social Science. Today in this unit we will discuss about the meaning and purpose of fieldwork and ethnography, and also to know about the characteristics of ethnography. We also try to understand the methods of data collection and analysis in ethnography, and we also further discuss about the problems, issues and dilemmas one may face in the field while doing ethnography. Let us start with the introduction. Research is systematic investigation of a phenomena done for the purpose of establishing facts and researching new conclusions. One can conduct research either in the laboratory like a science discipline, or in the library, or in the natural human settings like social science disciplines. Social science researchers are conducted either in the library or by studying human beings, or by combining both methods, library and studying human beings. Human beings can be studied either in their real life situations or away from their real settings. When the researcher studies human beings away from their natural spaces, in some other environment, the setting becomes artificial. Human beings are not at ease in such artificial conditions, and their behavior here does not remain natural and normal. They are not their normal self, as they do not feel comfortable either physically or psychologically. This affects the data collection process, which in turn affects the outcome of the research. Thus, studying human beings in the natural environment is essential. So, here fieldwork and ethnography help us to do this work. Now, let us understand fieldwork, its definition and basic elements. The term fieldwork comprises of two words, that is field and work. Field means the social world of study or the community of human beings who are being studied. So, the work that is carried out to study something in the natural environment where it occurs, such as an event or a culture, or that is inhabitants such as a community of human beings, is referred to as a fieldwork. So, fieldwork is one of the oldest forms of human inquiry or research practice in social science. It essentially engages with the words of others with the aim of studying them at close quarters. It is concerned with research on some aspects of human behavior in its everyday context. The basic elements of fieldwork is studying the situation of first hand, reflecting on them and interpreting them. So, ancient scholars like Thucydides of Greece and Sima of China followed these principles of fieldwork, whereas fieldwork is conducted in natural conditions with the aiming of gaining first hand knowledge of the situation. The researcher enters the field to observe and study human interaction directly. In the fieldwork, taking field notes is an important aspect of a fieldwork. Field notes are the researcher's record of his observations, experiences and reflections in the field. These field notes, when accumulated over a period of time, form the core of the written account of the study. Fieldwork is a sensitive process as it concerns studying human beings in the natural settings. So, the quality of relationship that is established between the researcher or the investigator and the respondents or the participants, and the way in which the relationship grows over a time is the key to the success of process of fieldwork. So, students, hope you have understood that what is fieldwork and its definition and the basic elements which I have explained. Now, we will discuss what is ethnography, its definition and the purpose and scope. Ethnography involves fieldwork. It is the written account of a particular culture. The term ethnography was originally used by anthropologists who consider fieldwork a key part of the discipline. However, now this method is used in all the social science disciplines such as sociology, economics, psychology, public administration, political science and conflict studies, etc. So, the main aim of the ethnography is to describe the culture or the way of life such as values, beliefs, knowledge, practices of a particular group from within. This is done by understanding and communicating what the event are or what is going on and how the members of the group interpret and understand what event or what is going on there. So, in order to do this, the researcher needs to understand not only his or her culture, but also the culture of the groups he or she studying. The purpose of ethnography is not to test what we know or think about culture, but its main purpose is to explore cultural knowledge. So, exploring here would mean first understanding and discovering the culture, then describing it, and when we finally come, we have to interpret it. And secondly, ethnography describes a culture from the point of view of its participants, and this is the insider or native point that is called in anthropology, which is referred to as a emic perspective. So, in ethnography, the researcher must try to understand the world from the insider's point of view, so as to discover how they see the world and ascribe meaning to it. So, in this sense, ethnography can be used as a tool to discover the worldview of others. Ethnography can be useful in several situations. It can be used as a method of gathering research material or to gain an entry point for irrigation or water projects, or to establish relationship when one is the guest or an outsider in the particular context. Ethnography can also be used by third party interveners for facilitating or mediating in a conflict. Ethnography will help the third party to understand the worldviews of the two parties as the conflicts are not just located in the material or social world, but also in the symbolic world where worldviews are formed. This will help look into the structural causes of individual and a group behavior, as well as be useful in understanding how meanings, symbols and norms contribute to making the enactment of individuals and groups behavior. Parties can also use ethnography to understand each other's perspective without the help of third party. Now, let us focus on characteristics of ethnography. As I said, ethnography is a unique research method in several ways. There are three fundamentals and interrelated presuppositions in ethnography, that is, data is not just gathering but created by human effort. Thus, how information is collected will eventually affect the content of the data, and researchers are complex creatures and their perception is shaped not just by the context in which they find themselves, but also the level of comfort and discomfort they experience in that context, and also the researcher and the research participants both affect the quality and the content of the data. So, in ethnography, interpretation is an important feature, and the above presuppositions are based on the premise that human life is about interpretation. Now, secondly, ethnography is implicitly comparative, as while studying another culture, the ethnographer needs to reference point to understand the values, beliefs and practices, and that reference point must most of the time is of their own culture. So, the ethnographer interacts with other cultures and tries to know about their ways of life. This makes them value their own culture. So, thus eventually the ethnographer ends up comparing the culture they are studying with their own culture. So, thirdly, this comparison may sometimes make the ethnographer reach the conclusion that their culture is superior. So, this attitude of superiority about one's own culture is referred to as ethnocentrism in the discipline of anthropology. So, field researchers how consciously reject the attitude of ethnocentrism and instead embrace cultural relativism. This is based on the premise that there is a rationale or logic behind each society's or cultural groups, values, beliefs and practices, and thus no culture is superior or better than any other one. So, every social group, every culture is distinct, and in order to explore this distinction, a researcher must engage with the group on its own ground. So, thus the goal of ethnographer is to make an effort to understand each culture's logics, rationale and distinctness. This is very important in ethnography. So, next, ethnographic study do not have a hypothesis which makes it different from most other social sciences research methodologies that are based on hypothesis, but the aim of ethnography is not to test a hypothesis, as having one would mean that the researcher has preconceived notions, biases and the stereotypes about the culture he or she is studying. In fact, the researcher should go into a culture without baggage and an empty mind and discover both the question and answer from the participant, so as to understand the situation from the emic perspective. Further, ethnographers arrived at middle range grounded theories. These are placed between inductive and deductive conclusions drawn from available information. Inductive approach is nothing but research conclusion based on observation, whereas deductive approach is based on logical or reasonable conclusion drawn from available information. So, besides that, ethnographers do not try to collect all and every bit of empirical data and describe them. Instead, they interpret data frequently inaccessible through the other methodological means and complement data collected through surveys, experiments and other techniques. This interpretation can lead to new concepts and theories. Additionally, ethnography relies on both qualitative and quantitative methods. Ethnographic methods recognize the importance of multiple worldviews and avoid generalizations. The researcher here seeks to unravel cultures and social settings that are generally hidden or difficult to locate. Another important feature of ethnography is the intensity of the relationship between the ethnographer and the field, especially the ethnographer and his or her informants or participants who are part of the social setting that is being studied by the ethnographer. While doing ethnographic study, the researcher spends and lives for extended period of time in the field with the people he or she is trying to understand. So, this result in the formation of intense relationship between the participants and the researcher. Here, the ethnographer must adapt to the rules, codes and experiences of the locals. This will be helpful in gaining trust of the people, where anthropologists call a rapport building. Now, we will understand the methods of data collection and analysis. So, as you know, fieldwork is central to ethnography. Though primarily observation, especially participant observation, is synonymous with ethnography, there are other methods through which data can be collected as well, such as interviews, document analysis and surveys. So, ethnographic interviews are normally conducted in unstructured and in-depth format, which generally takes the form of leisurely conversations between researcher and the participants. What distinguishes it procedurally from other in-depth interviews is the rapport that is established between the researcher and the participants, which is the result of the long-term contact between them. Both invest a lot of time in the interviews and there is a kind of openness between them. Thus, the relationship between the researcher and the participants is an even one. Nobody has an upper hand here. So, the questions posed by the researcher should be very honest, genuine and curious type, as the intention is to learn from the informant rather than impose one's own views on them. This is very important while doing field work or while collecting the ethnographic data. Here, the researcher starts with broad open-minded questions and then poses questions on specific categories identified by the informant in the answer to the open-ended questions. The question should not be framed in a way that directs the answer down a particular road that is defined by the ethnographer's worldview. One should thus be careful or simply asking why, as this presupposes certain assumptions. The ethnographer should, as far as possible, use the words of informants to reflect back their ideas, and when is doubt, he or she should always check the meaning of the word being used rather than assuming its meaning. So, the ethnographer should consider speaking to people in the places where they normally pass their days, such as in the marketplace or in the field, etc. Ethnographic interviews are analytically different from the types of interviews as they focus on cultural meanings. The researcher here tries to understand not just the cultural practices and beliefs, but also the meaning behind those. So, now we will try to understand what is document analysis. Document analysis is another method of data collection in ethnography. Here, text produced by the cultural or social group that is being studied is examined. This is useful in understanding the reality. Depending on the cultural group, data is being studied. The research can examine and analyze local newspaper, local television channels, local radio broadcast, local art and poetry, journals and the diaries, etc., which are available in the community. So, document analysis will supplement the collected data. Survey. Survey is another technique or method in the ethnography. So, survey is a systematic study of a community or a group or an institution done with the aim of analyzing the problem or the issue or an event. A survey is done by developing a questionnaire that is presented to the sample of respondents. The questions may be either open-ended or close-ended. The sample can be drawn either carefully to represent a truly random selection of cases, or it can be less formally organized. In some ethnographic researches, a survey done with the help of questionnaire might be a good option to reach out to as many members of the particular cultural group as possible. So, observation, this is a very important tool or technique in the field work. Observation as a method of data collection has been used from time immemorial. It has three key elements: an event or a situation, an observational plan, and the concern for reliability and validity. Observational plan refers to what will be observed, content or frequency or duration. So, reliability and valuability are two major concerns with regard to data. So, data collection is considered reliable if the researcher gets the same data when a measurement is repeated under the same condition. But it is not possible to get an exact repetition of a measurement when one is working with human beings, as the respondent situation is most likely to have changed in the different ways with the changing in time. So, however, while using standardized methods of data collection, it is useful to get some assurance with regard to reliability. One possible way of doing this is to have two observers while using a structured observation. Another way could be to use alternative versions of questions, and if the researcher gets the same answer in both the versions, then he or she can consider the data to be reliable. Also, the researcher should always provide a detailed description of the context in which they made their observations. Validity is a problem in almost all social science research methods. It refers to whether or not something actually measures what it claims to be measured. So, one structured way to determine validity in observation is to construct a quantitative or qualitative categorical list either before or after the event, and the list could contain questions like what people were doing or what happened immediately prior to and after the event. And if the researcher draws this list before the event, he or she could use it to search for specific sorts of instances. If done afterwards, it could be used to identify and describe the categories observed by the researcher. There are two different perspectives about observation, a priori and second one is post priori. These are essentially concerned with whether or observation leads to knowledge or knowledge leads to observation. So, according to Culpeper opines that human perspective on any situation or a event is shaped partly by inheritance and partly by experience. This is a priori knowledge guides observation or the way human beings view any situation, and here the researcher can get knowledge leads to observation, whereas John Dewey on the other hand believed in a posteriori knowledge. This emphasized that all research arises out of actual life, that is observation of the event. So, observation leads to knowledge, and observation involves varying nature and extent of involvement or participation by the observer, whereas Raymond Gould in his article Rules of Sociological Field Observation published in the Journal of Forces in 1958 proposed 4 different roles of the observer. They range from participant to non-participant. So, the complete participant observation. Here the researcher becomes a full-fledged member of the group under study and is fully involved in the group activities, and the purpose of observation is hidden here. And the second is the participant as an observer. Here both the participant and researcher are aware that participants are being observed. So, there is a full disclosure about the observation. And the third one, the observer as a participant. Here involvement with participant is deliberately kept to the minimum and there is only a partial disclosure. So, the complete observer, here observers are not noticeable and not exposed to any social contact, they observed in very public place. The purpose of the observation is kept completely hidden, and most field workers find themselves working back and forth throughout their data collection along a continuum of roles, primarily between the middle and two, but occasionally slipping into one of the complete role positions. So, these roles, whether hidden or open, have advantages and disadvantages. So, concealed roles give access to the researcher to field that would otherwise be closed, such as those that are considered either immoral or illegal or both, example drug trafficking. So, however, hidden roles have been criticized or unethical and moral grounds and referred to as a unethical research. So, today I will stop here. Thank you.